am so excited to be here with all of you and all of these incredibly, truly remarkable women in AI. And I could not think of a better session to follow up that workshop that we just did, because we talked about human-centered AI in theory as a workshop. And now we'll talk about how AI can be inclusive in practice with each of these women who are doing it every day in the real world. I want to start with introductions, and instead of, you're not here to listen to me, you want to hear from this wonderful panel, so I will have Estelle introduce herself down on the end, please, Estelle.
I'm up first, testing. Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Estelle Giroux. I am CEO and co-founder of Trellis Health. My background is in basic science, so I'm a scientist, I'm a data nerd by training, PhD in population genetics. Early part of my career really deep in academia and population health across Australia, Southeast Asia, China. I then spent about 8 years at a company called Illumina. For those that are familiar, Illumina has a near monopoly on genetic testing technologies globally. And so at that time was leading a commercial team, building products, really trying to push forward our healthcare and our medical system towards this notion of personalized health or precision medicine. And so a big part of that was building products, but it was also working with the healthcare system that we have in this country. And so I say that I am a deep optimist, and I definitely bring a healthcare lens and a data lens to this panel, but a deep optimist in the future of health can be different to what we have today, but I am also incredibly cynical at how that happens in practice. And so a big part of that was me leaving that corporate, very comfortable lifestyle and building Trellis Health. We just came out of stealth last week.
Congratulations.
So we just closed our $1.8 million pre-seed round. It's one of the largest pre-seed rounds for a women's health company and a consumer women's health company in the last couple of years. We are building an operating system for family health and for women specifically as chief medical officers, typically of the family, and without really good tools to manage their own health or family health and kind of carry that burden.
Thanks. Anna.
Yes.
1,
2, 3. Okay. Great introduction. I am a technical leader with about 15 years of experience, mostly working in building software applications with a ML twist. I contributed to such products that you may all know, like Amazon Robotics, Alexa, multiple AWS services, and maybe some of you have tried Amazon One, where you scan your palm to pay for your transactions, so thank you for being a loyal customer. If one person recognizes this here, that's success. And so about a year ago, I moved to Walmart, and I'm currently in people tech, and it's a very interesting new space, as Walmart is the biggest employer in the world. It's about more than 2 million associates, and so every application we launch has a potential challenges, right, in terms of scale and interesting AI challenges we will talk about in a couple of minutes.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Sharbani Roy. Originally, I'd say I'm a recovering physicist and data scientist who got an MBA to learn how to speak at events like this better. And after that, I worked at a few startups, but really the bulk of my career has been in deeper tech. I was also in Alexa, led a few different areas and domains around smart home and communications. Then I was leading a piece of the machine learning infrastructure at Google that all of the internal customers like Gemini, you probably heard of that, run on, as well as open source. So running things like our TensorFlow, Keras, and JAX frameworks, our device ML offerings, those kinds of runtimes, and thinking about all of our ML ops services and frameworks as well. And most recently, a few months ago, I joined ARM to lead our AI and application software group.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm just going to follow up from Sharbani and say, I also did an MBA to be able to speak in events like this. I'm still an engineer at heart. I like building things. So my journey has been in and out of Silicon Valley. I think this morning, a lot of people spoke about their immigrant journey and what brought them and kept them at Silicon Valley. And I'm really happy. This is my second innings. And I'm at the right place at the right time. So in terms of my experience, I've been in deep tech pretty much my entire career. Started very early in the Cisco, which was the Google of that era, saw the crash. I was so young and so naive, I didn't see it coming. I lost all my money overnight, actually.
Wow.
A couple of $100,000, which was like a big amount at that time. And actually, that's what led me to go to an MBA, because I wanted to understand that you can build the best technology, but if you don't know what you're building and why, and understand the market and the customer, you can miss the boat. And in my career, even before MBA, after MBA, I was counting how many products have been failures, and actually I counted about 5, all of them at the tip of the sphere. Whether it was optical DWDM, which is like now coming back with a big bang. If you have seen Jensen Huang's keynote and NVIDIA GTC, you'll see optical is the, in the data center is very critical. Healthcare, telehealth, healthcare has always been my passion. Most of my family is doctors, so I was the black sheep when I went into engineering. And I thought telehealth would really make a difference. And that's what actually took me back to India after my business school. But we were too early. I think we needed the pandemic to actually make people aware that you could actually treat remotely. Smart cities, IoT. I'm a big believer on intelligent edge, and I saw the potential of AI on the edge back in 2012 and 13 when we were doing smart cities, because there is so much intelligence at the edge. You don't need the cloud. You need to be able to make decisions right then and there, whether it's healthcare with wearables, whether it's deciding how to manage a city, urban design, a lot of climate, a lot of these can be done on the edge. And we were too early. And so there are like countless stories, but my more recent understanding of the inflection point on AI, actually Caroline and I were sipping coffee, remember, in 2016 on the campus at Stanford when I moved, and I knew that was going to happen. And we talked about responsible AI almost 10 years ago, right? And I said, okay, this is critical, and I'm going to help shape the future of this technology. I was lucky to join a speech AI startup, and I've been leading speech and computer vision features at Cisco. And as we go through the panel, I'll discuss some of our successes and failures, which have taught us why it's critical to build inclusive teams.
I love it. Thanks so much for those fantastic introductions. And now that we know the panel a little bit, just to give us the lay of the land here, how many of you in the room are students currently? So a pocket, and everybody's here. So that's really good to know. And the rest of you are working in the field?
Students of life.
Students of life, aren't we all? So we'll kick off our panel with our first question, and I think we're going to start in the middle with Shabani. When you think about inclusivity and how AI is being used in your organization today, can you talk a little bit more about how you're seeing AI applied at ARM?
Yeah, I can talk about ARM and the other companies that I've been at as well. I mean, it always starts with the data and understanding first what kind of data, whatever models you're using, whatever you're using to augment the models, making sure that that's representative and that you've put intentionality in kind of how you're constructing the assumptions that you're making and where your data is coming from, so also understanding the lineage of that data as much as possible. And then the people that you work with are also equally important. You need to have diverse backgrounds of all types, shapes, and sizes so that you can be thinking about how you are checking what your workflows will actually be for leveraging that AI and kind of the end use cases that you're trying to apply that to, making sure that you're thinking through all of the different types of representations that you need to drive those outcomes.
Thanks, Sharbani. How about you, Anna?
So the question is how we see the need for inclusivity within the company.
Yeah, how are you seeing it used today at
Yes.
Walmart?
Yeah, absolutely. As an engineering and machine learning leader in people tech organization within Walmart, I see tremendous opportunities to use AI to simplify and humanize our employee experience. Speak 1, 2, okay, better, right? Yeah. Okay. I see. So I see great opportunity for using AI to humanize our employee experience. We use AI today to automate manual and repeated tasks such as creating job postings, reviewing resumes, categorizing candidates, or powering our self-serve contact centers. And so within this, actually, my current focus is very exciting. I am working on this product called My Assistant, which is a internal enterprise-wide associate-facing chatbot that aims to help our associates to perform their day-to-day tasks, such as writing their emails, analyzing their data, documents, or creating their career goals. So I mentioned earlier that in Walmart, our workforce is such diverse. I think we're in 19 countries, and there are more than 50 different job families and levels. All of that adds complexity. And so when we're making decisions in such high-stake environment, like who gets the job, right? Who gets the promotion? That's just really important to know that we can trust our AI systems.
Absolutely. Estelle, can you talk a little bit about how you're seeing AI being used in healthcare, particularly as it impacts women's health as well, because that's near and dear to you?
I could talk a lot about this, but
Somehow
I will also go back to Shabani's point on the data. So a really important point to make here for healthcare specifically is there is this radical data gap, particularly for women's health. So there is a health gap for women, there is a data gap for women, there is a health span gap for women. You've got these like layers of problems, and I don't know the background necessarily of everybody in this audience, but like the statistics, you know, we have only been allowed to use female rats in scientific experiments, rats and mice, for the last rats and mice for the last 6 years. So that means that 97% of all scientific data, of all scientific knowledge, everything we know about autoimmune conditions and neuroscience conditions and all of this is really based on male physiology. And so like women have only been allowed in clinical trials since 1993. Like for the last 30 years, we've such a like catch up. And so, you know, talking about AI and how it's used in the industry, the risk, right, is that it's moving so fast and we're building, you know, layers upon layers on the foundations of the data that we generated over the last 40 or 50 years. The foundation of that data is biased. Like it will be fundamentally biased. And so now we're trying to figure out how are we not accelerating misdiagnosis, misrepresentation, not understanding physiology in the right way, and how do we play catch up, pretty much. And so that's, you know, really what I'm about. And I can talk about that more. And then the other quick thing I'll say on the startup side, right? Like I'm fast growth consumer startup. So how can I do as much as possible with as few people as possible? How can I leverage AI for marketing material and social and content and all of these things? And so would love to put a pin in that and come back to that later on all the ways that needs more work.
I love that.
Can I add one other
Of course.
thing that Estelle mentioned to me yesterday, which I think is also really insightful? It even comes down to little things that you may not realize, like what you're naming your coding assistants or your security assistants.
Yes.
So Estelle was saying that at Trellis, you guys are trying to give representative names even, or when you're planning your products, imagining your customers, imagining you know, diverse names and backgrounds from the very start.
Yeah, so a follow-up question there is, what's the impact when we don't think about that, when we don't give those representative names in the healthcare industry and across all of your industries? What is the impact?
I mean, I think primarily it's a cultural thing as well, and it like infuses through the teams that we build, but then it just like, you know, compounds beyond that. So as an example, the conversation I was having yesterday with Shabani, we have 2 AI employees at Trellis today. The first one is Eric, who is our code review. He writes fantastic reports. He does all our first pass code reviews. But what you find is that a lot of companies will name the assistants female, and the engineers and the software, Devin, all of these are male. And so our penetration tester, our security engineer that does all the pen testing and checks all our headers and everything is Jerry, and she's a woman. And so we're just trying to reframe that a little bit culturally, internally as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Savita, what about you? At Cisco and in your industry, how are you seeing inclusivity with AI coming to life?
I can just talk about my personal experience, right? So just for context, right? So we were a small speech AI startup. We got acquired by Cisco in the pandemic. So we are in the deep tech speech space. When I say speech, often people are thinking about speech recognition and text to speech, voice assistance, and so on. But speech itself is a very complex thing coming out of our mouth, right? Because the way, like right now I'm speaking on the phone or this microphone, what I learned recently from a voice coach is that these devices were originally built for male voices, not for female voices. Just because our speech frequencies are in slightly higher range, you think about just telephony, public telephony, right? Like the old landline. Why did they pick narrowband 8 kilohertz? And it basically takes the richness of voice, women's voices out. So there's like fundamental problems of how technology was built over the last 5 years. And then when you come to enhancing speech, which is what we were focused on, removing reverb, noise backgrounds and so on, and then also detecting who's near and far. And it was kind of interesting because when you say noise, children's voices and women's voices overlap. Our laughter might overlap because the model is dumb. The model doesn't know. It's just looking at the way women laugh. And so one of the first things people told me, actually I'm the product leader, is after the pandemic began, oh, we don't hear your laughter anymore. And then we got complaints from our users across Cisco, like all the women, because we first rolled out inside Cisco, that, like all the women said, I think our laughters are getting suppressed because women laugh.
Wow.
Right? Kamala Harris, everybody has been complaining that she laughs, and I'm like, okay, fine, we can laugh. Right? The second other noticeable thing was just how each of us speaks based on our linguistic backgrounds. I tend to speak very fast because most Indians or Latin American background, we tend to, by the way our language is, we tend to speak fast. And then you add the women's speech frequencies, right? Like the model started suppressing or chopping my voice. And so we have a whole Savita data set, which we expanded to include more women's voices. So really looking at data on how it's structured, and honestly, nobody really knows. Everybody, it is just a statistical exercise. We are always thinking we are doing the right thing in the distribution. And we build small models which run on the edge. So we actually don't know. And we have had models which have failed, like on the video side, because we thought that we maybe added more old people when we were doing super resolution. And so it started adding wrinkles and white hair on younger people.
Whoops.
And so obviously we had to can that project, right? But it was a learning because we don't know.
That's a perfect jumping off point for the next question, which is where have you all seen inclusive design fail? Who wants to take it?
Yeah, so I don't want to keep hopping on data, but at the end of the day, it's very, very challenging to correct things if the underlying, we talk about, foundation models being foundational, but at the end of the day, those foundation models are still trained on the internet, and the internet is incredibly homogeneous. And so when you take that training data and you summarize it and you consolidate it and then you train models on that, and then you iterate on those models, and you're training models on a previous model, which is then trained on the internet, you've got layers and layers of kind of bias baked into that gets very, very challenging to correct. It's basically like hard-coded in because of the sources of data that we have. And it's like, I don't think it's like practically possible to go and correct that at a foundational level of like the sheer amount of content that we have on the internet and everything that these models have been trained on. And like, it's an easier problem in medicine, but even in medicine, our clinical guidelines are baked into, hard-coded into research studies on very small populations of a very homogeneous population. So pretty much all drug dosing guidelines come back down to a study that was done in the 1960s on literally five white men. And so you get these like, wedges of like knowledge that we assume is foundational. You build on top of that, and you build on top of that, and you refine and whatever. And so something that we've been thinking a lot about at Trellis, this isn't an example of like how has it worked, but it's a hopeful example of how could it work, which is going back to some of the themes here, like edge compute. Like a lot of these things are a centralized model is designed to give you the best average answer. That best average answer is going to be biased because of what it's been built on. So how do you correct that in real time for an individual participant? And can you do that at the edge? And so one of the things, like we think about it in a healthcare lens, but even in a general lens, right? Like being able to train a mini model on bias and being able to recognize bias. Like here are the pillars of the way that things are misrepresented or the way that bias might be able to show up, and then have that model at the edge kind of acting like a filter and acting like a correction force that can, and having a feedback loop from that so that we can start to just in real time be able to kind of create a different feedback loop.
Can I add one thing? So in addition to finding the route to unbiased data, which is X
I see what
meters
you did
ahead.
there. Yeah, very nice.
Very funny. One of the things I want to tease out of this as well, in addition to getting accurate kind of sampling and representation of the data, I want to put a word out there, authenticity.
Love it.
You can make whatever face you want, but authenticity in the data is very important. So it's both when you're getting the data, how truly representative of the experience that you're trying to get from the, and also eval. So we're looking at big models and having reinforcement learning. When you have those humans, and there's a lot of companies that are trying to get eval kind of no matter the cost, you may not be getting the most authentic evaluation of the correctness and the representation and the accuracy of that data. So I have a small anecdote from, maybe it's a little outdated, but something where we were trying to launch a new region in Alexa many years ago, and it was in German. We were trying to launch German, and we were trying to close some of the domain gaps and provide enough sample of data for the smart home. So Anna and I actually worked together on this many years ago, spoiler alert, and one of our colleagues and myself were tasked with testing, along with the other people who could moderately pronounce German, for a number of the golden utterances we need. So I said, Alexa, zeige die Haustürkamera as many times as possible. Not too bad, right? Not terrible. You understood what I was saying. Really bad. But you get the point is, I don't speak German. I speak a few other languages, but German is not on my list. It's on my wish list. And as a result, we did this so much. We helped improve and add female voices to the selection, but we actually skewed the model so that it started only understanding poorly pronounced German and not high German, which caused a whole bunch of issues because we added representation, but it wasn't authentic.
I want to add to that
Yeah.
too.
He's going to make fun of my accent as well.
First of all, Sharbani knows how many 5 languages. I can't count anymore. Okay, a handful. So yes, I am sure your German wasn't too bad. In terms of speaking about outdated anecdotes, some of you may have heard of this, just reminds me of something, Microsoft Thai chatbot, if you remember that, it happened in 2016 when things went really wrong.
Yeah.
Yes, where Microsoft trained and designed this chatbot to engage with Twitter users and learn from them and talk to them. And so they shut it down, I think, within 24 hours because it started to make hate speech comments. And so that was mainly because internet trolls explored the vulnerability of this model, and they started feeding all this like nonsense. So while this exposes that the models are very fragile and they can pick up the wrong signals very fast and scale that harm further, and building upon multiple generations of those wrong assumptions, I think that was also the time when the world is like, oh, we need to get this right next time, right? That really kind of triggered the conversation about serious responsible AI and not just the talk about hypotheticals of it. So around that time, I feel it was.
Can I add to it? I think, see, we can beat up and talk about all the data bias and all that, but I think we as scientists, as engineers, as builders, we understand the positive influence of AI, right? And I think we need to start with that fundamental assumption of how do we build and control AI and bring it for the benefit of humanity? Because I think that I strongly believe in. And so when we started embarking on new innovations in the speech space, for example, how do you take narrowband speech and make it sound wideband speech using AI model, right? In our first generation of models, we didn't think about language because speech frequency and non-speech frequencies are different, and so the model works. So that didn't strike us, but we thought we can continue with that. But when you are taking narrowband speech and enhancing it, we started noticing that it added lisp. So like the engineers on our team, we say, oh, this is crappy. Like, early version of the model, right? Like this guy is perfect. He speaks good English. Why does he sound like a child with a lisp, right? That won't work. And so then it struck us that we need to test across multiple languages. And so we started collecting from across our team different languages, which adds to the reason why you need diverse teams in the first place, because it's much more easier to test when you have a diverse team. So we collected all Indian languages, European languages, and we had to build new test methodologies. We called it speech intelligibility test, and we have research papers in this space, which is basically looking at the phonemes in speech across different languages. Because the model is stupid. I mean, it's a small model because it's running on the edge, where you have to understand where the model is changing the speech pattern when it's predicting what is the lost frequency in somebody's voice. And I think we came such a long way. Of course, now recently I've been notified that maybe we are actually not doing well on Turkish. I don't know. We are going to debug and find out. But Turkish was not in our test data set. So we'll figure out.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is speech sounds better when you bring all the richer frequencies, right? When you reproduce speech from lost packets, you can hear better. Speech without noise and reverb and echo, it's so rich. Now whenever I talk on WhatsApp and there's background noise, I cannot hear. My hearing is bad. I spend too much time in the lab with the hardware switches, so I can't help it.
That's a great story about iterating, learning, and understanding. And so I'm curious, within your organizations, what mechanisms do you have in place to really ensure open, honest conversations about inclusivity? Sharbani, you're looking at me like you really want to answer this.
Sitting for it, but inclusivity in our products across the board. I think there are certain things that I've done at all the companies I've been at when we're starting from the very beginning of setting, the vision, understanding our customer base, but taking the vision and saying, who do we think would be representative that we're solving for, and trying to make sure, again, the personas that we're using, that we have good representation. And that means, not just what you see, but what you don't see, and trying to make sure that you're defining that really clearly for the cohort of products that you're trying to be delivering. And then I think there's always, people that you as point in meetings that you can say, who are you, do you think that we are bringing any bias into this? Do you think that we're looking in a representative way? You can have kind of some of those people that are supposed to be the kind of advocate, questioning whatever you have. Works sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are on their phones or checking their emails or doing other things.
So who are the people in the room when you're asking those questions?
Oh, usually when you're doing like the decision making on the products, and when you're setting what are the exit criteria for the product, what does good look like, what are the KPIs, because you can say, oh, well, we followed the numbers, we hit all of our KPI targets, but were those KPIs taking into account all of the different
So you've got product in the room, you've got
product engineering, design, TPM,
the whole
UX,
crew,
everything.
Yeah.
Data science. All of the. Are we going to go into the question on the blurring lines of roles in the face of AI as well?
We can take this wherever you want. Yes.
Okay.
You will hear data a lot today in every machine learning conference. Like Shabani started with this and emphasized every one of us sees how data, what is it? Garbage in, garbage out. Some of you may have heard this too. And so I once had led a data team for AWS machine learning models. And that was around the time when as a starting point, all the standards started to come out. Like OECD, it was the first time, it's Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. So they said, in a nutshell, innovation isn't enough. It's great, but you need to do better, right? And they said that machine learning models must follow our democratic and fairness values. So that was the first time where the world kind of acknowledged that we will align and standardize on what fairness means within machine learning space, and it was very, very ambiguous, and it still is. So at the time, I remember that AWS started a responsible AI team, which is called Fairness Team, I believe. So they worked with each individual data owner to develop a success criteria for what fairness means. If we talk about computer vision, right, and if you process people, pictures, or faces, which was the most contagious, right, cause a lot of contradiction, then they would say, okay, we want this many dimensions, we want, this different races, and we want this different, and we want women and men and kids in different ages for different levels. So that was quite elaborate, and I really liked how we started to put those mechanisms in place and bake in those fairness reviews in our product cycle. So what Shabani mentioned is we would invite the fairness representative to help us understand what are the different edge cases and risks that we see with launching this product, right? What's the worst headline we're going to see from this? And so there was a lot of noise from other companies like IBM and many, many others at the time. So we agreed that this would be the process, and I felt that that was some meaningful and very clear process that you just follow, and that becomes a standard.
Thank you.
One thing also, those that I think you guys also did this, was bake in at the beginning, because
Yes.
it's kind of like, I think of it almost like security as well. A lot of times if you leave it to the end and you don't bring those security or privacy experts along from the very beginning, you get to a point where you're like, oh my God, we can't launch this. Oh my God, we completely built this in the wrong way. So I think it's be inclusive with your inclusivity ambassadors from the very beginning, if that's the right kind of, does that resonate?
Yeah,
with everyone?
totally.
Okay.
Estelle, you want to answer this one too?
Yeah, I'm going to add to this really quickly as well, because it's on that visibility and bringing people in from the beginning. So I have the advantage of being in a very, very tiny team. So I think it gets harder as your organizations get bigger, right? And you just then need more structure in place, more process, and everything in place to ensure this doesn't happen. But one of the things that we do at Trellis is try and foster this notion of build in public, learn in public with AI. And so we have super tactical, but it really, really makes a difference. And so we have a Slack channel that's just dedicated to like, how are we using AI? And there's no shame, there's no stigma. Like anybody can use any AI they want, like within reason. There's a few rules there, but the rules are you have to like share the knowledge, right, with the group. And so it's things like, what prompt are you using? Can we help each other get better prompts? Are there biases in your prompts? Like, how do we collectively, and then the build in public, learn in public thing means that it's a safe place for other people to have opinions or to put input in a really like non-threatening way. And so, yeah, but it gets much, much harder as the organization gets bigger.
Yeah, let me add to this. I think every organization should actually have a responsible AI framework. It has to start from the top. I would say 4 years ago, we didn't have that at Cisco, like when we got acquired by Cisco. And so we were sort of the first guinea pigs in the organization wide to help craft the responsible AI framework. How to do responsible AI assessment before a feature is GA'd. Have we really reached a point where everybody in the company understands the how part of it? I don't think so. And that's true across the industry. And so I really like the way Chirag Shah, the professor, framed it this morning. Instead of saying responsible AI, the responsibility around AI. And I'm going to use that framing to convince my teams, because unfortunately there is pressure to release products, to ship products. And somebody release something, I need to release something, right? And so that pressure is driving the motion across every company, and we are no different. And we make mistakes because you could design the model, maybe you made assumptions about how the model is structured, the architecture, all of that. The distribution of data, I think what Sharbani was referring to is the eval data set, right? For every model, the representation of the eval data set is very different. For us, it's like, okay, different kinds of speech, clean speech, noisy speech. On the video side, people sitting in front of computer under different light conditions. The other major problem that I have experienced is if you don't know how to structure the